Regina Thiergardt is joining me from Zurich, Switzerland. Regina is an executive coach who has worked for 2 decades in the pharmaceutical industry, first as a chemist and then as the head of research and development, followed by a decade working as an HR consultant, supporting leadership development, executive searches, and performance reviews. I got to know Regina through her presentation on Logosynthesis Day 2022, where she describes how she supports individuals to unleash the leader within. Thank you for joining me, Regina. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm thrilled to be here.
So to start, I always like to ask people to describe how they were introduced to logosynthesis. And if you could maybe tell us a little bit about that and what made you curious to learn about this model.
So the first time I came across logosynthesis, that was in 2012 when I was attending a coaching training or coaching education. And one of my peers was Tanja Frieden, the Swiss Olympic champion in watercross. And she used logosynthesis during her active days in sports. And she really radiated a lot of energy about using logosynthesis. And so I bought the book, Self-Coaching with Logosynthesis, and read this book. That was my first introduction. And I have to say, I found it fascinating reading the book. But to be honest, I thought, I'm not sure if I have an example to use logosynthesis. I'm not really sure what it has to do with me. So all of
did you know.
all of my patterns were still upward. So it took almost 1.5 years since I really was in a need for logosynthesis. My mom suffered a stroke, and I was really caught up in emotions about feeling guilty, not having taken better care of her, and to be blamed for it and whatever. And that was the reason I attended a self-coaching seminar and was immediately on fire. And I think it was also lucky that I had really great success using logosynthesis first time. I worked on this belief: I'm responsible for my parents' happiness, and was able to get rid of it. And to describe it, it's beyond describing. It was such a relief. And even after 48 and even 3 days, 48 hours and 3 days, I still felt, a huge burden is off my shoulders. And then I was really on the hook. And used ever since, I've been using logosynthesis for myself, but to put it on a really good foundation and to use it for clients, I attended the practitioner of logosynthesis in 2018 and finished it in the very same year, because again, it was so fascinating and I had lots of examples for myself to use it.
Yeah, it's interesting where you talk about, that feeling of responsibility, because so often, we feel responsible for it all. And we think with our logical brain that the only option is to not be responsible. But yet when we let go of that energy that's stuck in, feeling that I have to do it all and I have to be responsible and I'm responsible for someone else's happiness. And when we can just shift that energy, it's not so much that we're not responsible anymore, but we just don't carry the weight of it. So yeah, it's hard to explain it to people, isn't it?
Yeah. And I never thought that it would be so stressful. And I was always a calm and balanced person. But in this situation, that was really, I think I would say it was one of my biggest crises, because I really was caught up in this responsibility. I think I had it before, but I never felt the burden of it.
Yeah. And that's what Willem often says to us, we cope for so long until something happens in our life. And then all of a sudden it becomes too much or it starts to break down. And
Mhm.
you know, with my background in dietetics, it was always preventative health. So to
Mhm.
me, yes, we can go along until a pandemic hits and then all of a sudden we're struggling, or we can start to work away at the
Mhm.
layers and have,
Mhm.
you know, even if we can't find them, we can have people to guide us to help work away at those layers
Mhm.
so that when
Mhm.
something does hit, it's maybe a little more bearable. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by doing that, starting this process, all these layers come up. No? It's like an onion, no? And you can peel them off shell by shell or layer by layer. And I think that I found really fascinating. And at the
Yes.
same time, feeling your energy, your life energy somehow coming back to you.
Yeah. So, as an executive coach, can you tell us who comes to look for support, who's looking for guidance, and what stage of the career they're in, what types of
Mhm.
struggles they might have, and then what you offer for support and guidance?
Yeah, people come for various reasons. Often it's a point in their career they have been successful for at least 10 years in leadership positions. So most of these people are around 40, 45, some of them even a little bit even older than that. And it's always this ambivalence between I'm successful, but, and the but is about I'm not fulfilled in my life, or I feel like I'm stuck, or I feel there's much more I can give, and there's much more I want to give, but I don't have the guts to start something different. So that is often the case. Others come really because they are looking for the next leadership level or looking for the next step in their career and want to be prepared or to be more effective, or they come across challenges with demanding co-workers and want really to work on the repertoire of leadership models and leadership styles. And even when I say leadership styles, that is also a lot of people come because they want to really do a deep dive into new leadership styles. They read a lot about shared leadership or new work leadership or transformational leadership and have no idea how to really get started with that and how to be prepared to this change. And because often it's a huge change to the leadership style. So that is the third category, I would say. And the
Interesting.
main age category, it's normally in the mid or beginning of the 40s, and even a second category, mid of the 50s, because all these 50 plus are so dynamic and so full of energy. They want really to do something with their life and something that is purposeful, but they don't want to do the same they did for 20 years or so.
Yes, we often talk about it in terms of transitions, don't we? So we come to
Mm-hmm.
transitions in our life and
Mm-hmm.
what's that
Mm-hmm.
next step forward, and that's sometimes where the patterns end up showing up and things start to break down as well, but it can
Mm-hmm.
be quite liberating to kind of clear that and then have our energy available to move forward. I was speaking and coaching someone the other day that was in her 70s that
Mm-hmm.
was interested in taking
Mm-hmm.
that next step forward. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's never you are never too old, and you're never too old to have to unleash potential. So often companies display the attitude, when you are 50 plus, it is not even worth the effort to put a lot of energy in terms of cost into talent development. And I think that's completely wrong.
Yeah.
Everyone has potential to be
Yes.
unleashed.
Yes, and whether, you know, whether it's something that you're doing through your company,
Mm-hmm.
which is what you deal with, but also, you know, even a lot of people are doing it for their own personal development
Yeah.
because the investment for themselves is so critical and again so inspiring.
Yeah, to be honest, now in my own company, I would say more than 90% of my clients pay for themselves. So in my former role as in outplacement, new placement, 90% of the people their programs were paid for by the companies. But now as a leadership coach, people come on their own and they want to pay something for themselves. Often when I make a proposal, perhaps you find a way to have your company supporting this program. They say, no, I don't want that. I want something for myself. And I want also to invest in myself.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, what better investment is there than to invest in yourself, right?
Yeah.
So you touched on the fact that there are a lot of resources that are available to help guide people. What about logosynthesis makes it unique? What makes it kind of that preferred model to work with?
Yeah, it comes into the game often when we discuss my unique or my very own vision, or you can also call it mission, but often we use the term vision. What I really want from life, from business, whatever. Because normally we are all used to wear blinders over the years, and our perspective is very limited on what we can do, what we're allowed to do, what we should do, and so on and so forth. And I think that is often the first touch point. I feel or I sense the potential in people. Sometimes I say I almost smell it. and when I give feedback, often I run into open doors, as you say in German. So people say, yeah, I often thought about, or I was toying with the idea that, but I'm not sure. I think I'm too old, whatever. So vision often is the first interaction or the first stage gate where logosynthesis comes into the game. In other cases, when people come because of leadership problems, so to speak, I have problems dealing with my co-workers, and so logosynthesis sometimes is a methodology I introduce even in the first meeting, because it seems to be so urgent. The individual is so stressed out that yet I even introduce it before. But otherwise, it's about vision. And after the vision is clear and put on paper, what is now hindering me to really walk on this path?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's clearing the blocks as they show up, right? One of the things that I know I've often struggled with, and I've seen it working in the corporate environment, is that I'm doing fine. It's the others that aren't doing so well, and they're the ones that need support. So it's not me, it's someone else. And so it's a little bit that self-awareness, but yet I've come to appreciate that even when I'm doing fine, how much can shift when I pay attention to what bothers me. And often when I see others struggle and notice how I react to that, that can give me some good information to start my own work. And I think from my perspective, like from a leadership perspective, I think it's so critical to recognize, like a lot of times we want to go out there and fix everything for people. And yet when we can kind of calm our reaction to what's happening around us, then things can settle out a little bit better. So do you notice this challenge in your work? In some ways, they're not necessarily the people that are coming looking for help, because they're going to send someone else to come see you.
I think it's also what you described before is a good definition of being present. I'm fully here with all my senses. I'm all ears, I'm all eyes, and not already thinking about my answer to your question, or even anticipating, I think she might go in this direction, and I'm prepared to shoot. And I think that is often what people really helps to come across their obstacles and hurdles. When I describe this way of how we react to others, also this concept of you make me feel.
Yes.
And we always think the
Yes.
other one is to blame for that. Plus unbiased and frank feedback, that often is really the door opener. That people come to this awareness and consciousness. No? Oh, I think it has to do with me. And also I use the phrase, the power is with me. No? Nobody else has the power. I often use a quote also of Viktor Frankl, no? Between action and reaction, there's a space, and there lies our power. And I think a lot of people realize, power, oh, great. And also, this is a way of freedom if I'm not always forced to react immediately, like I'm almost like on a jump.
Yeah.
And I think that is a relief, even though it sounds a little bit awkward, and it's not so easy to start this way of acting, but it makes sense. No? Power and freedom often do the trick, these words, when you introduce them.
Yes, yes. And I just think it is so powerful when we can take a pause and notice how we're responding when we're in those situations, a lot of change or a lot of uncertainty, and people are struggling, and maybe we are doing fine, but we yet have an opportunity to notice how we're responding and apply logosynthesis and to be more present in that situation. And I think overall we benefit.
Yeah, and it also needs something like, I'm not always eager to deliver. A lot of people feel so much pressure to always deliver. In an instant, somebody's coming to the desk asking something, I need to deliver, I need to have an answer, otherwise I'm a lousy boss or whatever. It also comes with these models of the world and what is leadership. And with constantly delivering, you don't even notice if there is a trigger coming across to you. You just respond. It's the way you have to do.
Yeah. And the other one that comes up quite often is the I should do more. So, it's being responsible, it's delivering promptly, and then it's that element of I should do more. So a lot of people say my workload is so heavy and my work is so demanding. And yet when you can kind of calm those triggers that make you feel that you should do more, that you are responsible for it all, and that you always have to deliver, when you can resolve those triggers, you can be more present so it doesn't feel as demanding.
Yeah, and put the energy exactly into actions or people that are close to your heart, and not everywhere. I know for myself, in former days, I wanted to be present everywhere. I volunteered for a lot of projects in the company and also outside the company, to be among people, to be present, to show whatever, show my competence, I guess. And when you're working on blockages, and that I see in a lot of leaders, then all of a sudden you consciously assign energy to people and projects that are really close to your heart and not everywhere. And all of a sudden life is less stressful, and is also, you have more time. It seems you don't have more time, but you have the feeling of
say many hours in the day. Yes. Yeah. Well, and I was introduced to logosynthesis when I was working for Kraft Foods, and it was really beneficial for me when Kraft was bought by Heinz 3G in 2015, because there was so much change and there was so much uncertainty. But by noticing, when I went into a meeting and there was just too much work to do, or people were being let go. There were so many aspects of it. And by just noticing pretty much on a daily basis and using that same guided exercise to notice what I was responding to, you could start to feel calmer. And it isn't about then, I always say it's because sometimes we get to the point where it's like, I've had enough, I just have to quit. And to me, that's sometimes a reaction, but it's when I'm not reacting to everything, then I can actually be calm enough to take action. And so, I kind of view it like I was able to still focus on my work and the work of those around me so that we could deliver our sales targets in the midst of it. And we were one of the few teams that did in that time. So it's not about, kind of letting everything go and doing nothing. It's just removing all that stuff that's making us feel pressure and stress so that we're present to take the necessary action in a more calm and focused way, I think. Yeah. So we're in the midst of the pandemic right now. Do you see a lot of change and uncertainty? Are you seeing a lot of successful leaders coming forward that are feeling stressed and overwhelmed? And then how do you coach them in this area?
In the very beginning, in the first lockdown especially, a lot of people and leaders as well really suffered from not being able to living their patterns. So being out every night, being to parties, being to friends, being to sports, whatever. So all of a sudden they were thrown back to themselves, and all these difficult questions came up. And there I realized a lot of stressed managers, leaders, and people alike, and they needed to find a way to really cope with this. And at the same time, it was their chance to face obstacles and hurdles. So a lot of logosysts came into the programs with a pandemic situation. It was like a vehicle. The pandemic was a vehicle to introducing logosynthesis and getting rid of obstacles and blockages. Now I think it's a little bit the difficulty. Some leaders really find it great that they experienced with new techniques, even with new leadership styles, like new work leadership style. Others want to return as quickly as possible to the old top-down leadership style, command and control. So you have both. You have some of them who are really now eagerly willing to experiment and do something new, and also try new styles and work on themselves to be an efficient leader in this new work leadership style. But others really struggle a lot and don't understand the world and want to find a safe haven to go back to the practices that they used before.
Which is normal, right? We're comfortable in those circles that we're familiar with, and that gives us kind of a safe place. Yeah. So one of the questions I had when I was thinking of having this conversation with you was around, the technical piece, because you're a chemist by training, you did R&D. I studied science and I worked in quality control in my first job in the food industry. And so a lot of technical issues were really important. And so, we focused a lot of times on that technical expertise and the training. And then, but early on, I really began to appreciate, we can have all that technical expertise, and yet the interpersonal skills and the leadership skills really had a huge influence on the success, and we didn't really have a way. Now that was a few years back, but all through my career, I don't think it really changed much. I remember saying at one point to one of my colleagues at work, it was like, okay, I just spent like 30 years in the food industry, and sometimes I think we haven't changed at all. So some of those patterns, those interpersonal patterns, get stuck in the culture of the organization, and it's really hard to shift it. And we place a lot of emphasis on the technical piece. So I'm wondering if you can just maybe describe a little bit that interaction between the technical, the interpersonal, and the leadership, because technical is important, but so are those other skills.
Mm. Yeah, I was a chemist and project leader myself when I started my career. In this role, it was not only the technical piece, because we did research and development for clients and customers, big or small pharmaceutical companies. So I was in an innovator company, but later I was in a more custom manufacturing and custom development company. So you constantly were exposed to various character types and various customers and internal resources disciplines. So it was always equally important to deal with interpersonal understanding as well as with technical issues, because often in a project something goes wrong, and upscaling doesn't work, or you can't meet the timeline. And then it's your skill set of communication, interpersonal understanding that wins the game, and not only the technical solution. So I came across really pretty early in my career how important understanding of other people and integration of different and diverse personalities, how important that is. But I know as head of R&D, it was always difficult to encourage people to choose a team approach. Most of the scientists have the syndrome of, it's not invented by me and it has to be invented by me. And we had lots of discussions about that. I said, I don't care who did the creative, who had the creative idea. I care that we solve this problem and that we have a new synthetic approach for our customer. That was one of the biggest hurdles, the big ego. I'm as a scientist, and my value comes with my creativity and with my innovations. And I think that you see often in the scientific world, not only there, but you see it often because it's based on publications, it's based on patents. No? You have so deliverables. No?
Yes. And I mean, when you talk about that, so that was kind of, if you think of the individual's energy and then the organization's energy. So in logosynthesis, we talk about essence and the matrix, right? So when we're immersed in that organization, we often don't really notice the culture. And I know when, because I was in marketing and we were launching products, actually it was when I was still in production, but they were launching a product and forgot to tell the person that purchased the packaging to order the packaging because everything was so secret, and the pillars in the organization, right? And so, you get into those interpersonal conflicts, I think, that get in the way, and they're sometimes can be really hard to put a finger on, and even more difficult to resolve those conflicts unless you have a method to get rid of those trigger points, I guess. So, and to me, that's where logosynthesis comes in so nicely. So sometimes, people are too aggressive, but other times people are too nice. And so there's those fine lines, and it's kind of resolving those blocks along the way. So do you in your leadership coaching, I guess, do you speak to the organization's energy, the culture versus the individual's role in shifting it? And can you maybe...
especially for me, a leader is equal an energy manager he or she is responsible for clearing away clearing blocks, no? So that the energy of the organization is flowing freely. And in this way, we have a lot of discussion, no? Be the energy you strive for, no? And as a role model, you always work on your obstacles, and thereby radiating your change encourages others to do the same. So I think that is, and you see it a lot, no? When the head of a department starts going through a transformation process, let's call it like this, the entire organization transforms.
And it doesn't even, it can be at any level in the organization. I know they used to joke with me. It's like, oh, there, Kathy got triggered again. But then when you have something that you can clear it, right? When you can clear your reaction, then we can all be more aware of, okay, something bothered me. I can notice what my response is and I can do something about it, instead of every meeting I go into and someone annoys me that I'm having that same response every time. So yeah, it's nice to have something that you can actually resolve the issues, that you're not, because a lot of times we get stuck in those patterns of interpersonal relationships, that one person bothers another person, and it's an ongoing thing for years. And to be able to shift that, to me, is so powerful. And I really don't know anything other than logosynthesis that shifts it the way logosynthesis does.
Yeah, especially it's so efficient and easy to apply. And I often say it's not invasive in the way, I don't know what is the story behind or where the belief comes from. And I don't need to know. I work a lot with metaphors, or even with, let them draw a small symbol or whatever comes to the mind. And most of the time, I don't know what the story is about. But the client dissolves his or her blockage and interacts freely. And that is, I think, the magic of it.
Yeah, and once we start to understand why we react the way we do, and we can clear that energy so that we're not stuck in a pattern, it makes it a whole lot easier to understand why other people are reacting as they do, and not take it so personally, right? So
yeah. And
yeah.
that's exactly what I always do. I always come back to, and what is your part in this game? For example, I have now a client, she always complains about a co-worker who's really grumpy whenever she is told what needs to be done. And we did logosynthesis on this grumpy mouth. We also did logosynthesis on the triggered belief, I'm a lousy boss. But we discuss a lot about, it's you and your reaction. As long you are triggerable, or however the English word is, as long you can be triggered, there is still an issue we need to dissolve. And that gives completely different understanding about interaction between people. First, I start with myself, and when I can take an action in a neutral way, there is no harm done, and I have not the urge to fight back or to withdraw or whatever my typical stress reaction would be. And when you, as a leader, have the courage to talk about this process and how you dissolved your blockages, that's a really great influence on the culture in the entire organization or the entire team.
So true. Yeah. So do you have an example of working with someone? I know you just gave the example of the person that was annoyed by the other person they were working with. I'm just wondering if there's another example that you'd like to share before we wrap up, or
I think what I often see, and it's alike in women and men alike, often women think it's only a female problem, but it's not, is this belief of not good enough, or I think not good enough is the best way to describe it. And I had a client last year. She was in the program for almost 6 months. And for her, it was really embodied this belief, not good enough. And that led to her a leadership style that she always wanted to be in control. She always had to read everything, always have to check on everything, always have to work on new concepts. And so it was so difficult for her to delegate, not because she doesn't trust other people. It was more an inner urge to prove I'm worth to be a leader of this department. And this kind of behavior I often see, especially when it comes again to new leadership styles of shared leadership. And it's not laissez-faire style I'm talking now. Shared leadership is something different, and inspire the organization to take up responsibility. This belief, I think, is one of the most, the frequent belief we all have somehow in ourselves. And when you can get rid of this and the urge to prove that you're worth it, then a lot of leadership capacity or leadership power is released.
Wow. Yeah. What a great example. And you make a good point, because I think we all have a lot of these elements, right? I know when we do logosynthesis training, quite often we say, well, I'm on the bus for that issue, because, and they're issues that we tend to internalize because they're not always comfortable to share. We don't always have a really good handle on what's driving it, because we know a lot of the triggers are at an energetic level, not at a cognitive level, or we might refer to it as a subconscious level. So it's not things that we're going to go around sharing. We don't understand it. And this allows us to resolve it without having to go digging to try to understand it. But for me, what has been probably the most powerful is recognizing we all as humans have all of these experiences that cause us to get stuck, and we have the power to not stay stuck. And that is so liberating and empowering, and just very inspiring to me. And I know I don't work on everything that triggers me. But it gives we tend to have themes. Different people have different experiences, which lead to different themes. And some have had really traumatic experiences that have caused them to struggle intensely. But again, it's when we work with logosynthesis, it's the same process, layer by layer. And the stronger the working alliance, the safer the space we can provide for someone to start to heal some of those past experiences and some of those cultural attitudes and beliefs, then they can start to move forward. And regardless where we are in our life, in a leadership role or not, it's we're all leaders within, I guess, right? And
whenever you interact, you influence other people. That's so true.
Yeah. So to wrap up, what's a key message that you would like to share with those who are in leadership roles?
For me, the most important, be the energy you want to see or you strive for. It's your radiate the energy you strive for. I think that is the most important thing for me. And whenever you feel your own energy has a low frequency, I'm angry, or I'm grieving, or whatever it is, then work on that. Because by increasing your own frequency or your own energy level, you inspire others to go beyond and also to reach extraordinary results that I'm really convinced about.
Well, thank you so much, Regina. That was a wonderful conversation, and I look forward to sharing it and learning more about what you do. Take care.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you.